Hawaii Senator Brian Schatz tweeted this: "Why would we listen to the economist who admits that he went too small the last time if he's warning us to go too small again? I swear this town is nuts." It's like people can only remember 30 names, and so they just keep going back to the same people. Interesting that they would mention that, considering the same alumni from the Obama administration in the Biden team now. But let's welcome in now journalist and author and the host of the Trish Intel podcast, Trish Regan. Great to see you, Trish.
Hey, good to see you, John.
You know, it's interesting going back looking at this and all the hand-wringing and the second-guessing and the armchair quarterbacking that went on after the 2009 economic stimulus package. You know, there's an economist named Joseph Stiglitz. You know this guy, too. And he said the issue wasn't how much money, too big or too small. It's the moral hazards that it created, right? You know, they knew that, you know, government would be there to rescue people. The faucet never got turned off. The interest rates are low. So we really don't have a good idea on what kind of trouble the economy is in right now, do we?
The economy is actually doing remarkably okay. I'm going to say this because I'm going to point to last Friday's jobs report. We added jobs. John, imagine that.
Right.
You know, but nobody's telling Biden's team this. I mean, he got up there and told us how miserable and awful it was. And at this rate, we're not going to be back to where we were during the Trump years for another 10 years. And I'm like, okay, glad we hired you, buddy, right? There's something about the need for a little bit of optimism and a little bit of cheerleading. I mean, we need our president to be a realist, but nonetheless, he ought to give us some positive indication of what lays ahead. But unfortunately, this is all political. This is all about stimulus. They want to drive down our economy and talk it down so that they can get their massive $1.9 trillion stimulus package through. And anyone who dares to say, guys, you know, that might be a little bit too much. That might be a little bit excessive. We probably can't afford that. And that's going to lead to massive inflation, which penalizes the poor and the middle class. Oh, gosh darn it. They're about to get canceled, too.
Right.
I mean, Larry Summers, who was the Treasury Secretary under Clinton and was head of the National Economic Council of Advisors under Barack Obama, a former World Bank economist. They're out to get him now, John, because he dared to point out the obvious, the elephant in the room. We cannot afford this. And if you go too big, we're going to wind up with a whole lot of inflation, which is going to be a real big aftershock.
This is not my area of expertise, but I did just read his follow-up that I guess somebody got to Larry Summers over the weekend, and he put out a new Q&A, I guess, you know, answering some of these criticisms. But basically all he is saying is that, look, the economy is not as bad as Joe Biden is telling you it is. And if we do pump this much money into the economy, we could have inflation, stagnation, or maybe worse.
Yeah, look, I mean, there's nothing that penalizes the average American more than inflation. I mean, think about it. If you're saving for your retirement, John, and you've been working your whole life to save up $100,000 so that someday you get to retire in Florida, well, guess what? In 4 years' time, that $100,000 could be worth a whole lot less than it is right now. So what this tends to do, and I'm telling you, we saw this during the Barack Obama years, Obama-Biden years, right, where the Fed was so active, you saw a big run-up in markets. But did we see any real economic growth? No, basically less than 2% on an annualized basis. So what happens? The rich get richer, and the middle class and the poor continue to get squeezed. So this is not a panacea. You don't just hand out money. Not to mention, I mean, you cited Joe Stiglitz, and he's absolutely right. There is a lot of unintended consequences in all this, John. In other words, if we say to people, you're going to get $400 a week from the federal government to sit home along with another couple hundred, 300 from the states, why bother going to work? How are we ever going to see this economy get back on, you know, track if we're incentivizing people to not go to work and to stay home?
And that's the concern here about what happens. I mean, you know, it seems like they want to throw a lot of money at this problem. And it does seem like Republicans missed an opportunity before the election. And now Democrats have both houses of Congress and the presidency. They don't want Republicans anywhere near this bill, Trish.
Yeah, and I'll tell you this. I mean, just in terms of my own consistency, I thought Donald Trump's administration was being far too generous, actually, with those stimulus checks, because, again, we can't afford it. And if you look at the success our economy had over the summer and into the fall, we were on a pretty darn good path, John. And then all of a sudden they announce all these massive checks, and what do you know? Unemployment rates go up. So there is a correlation. I'm not saying that government shouldn't be there to help people in need, but we need to be thoughtful. we need to be thoughtful about this because the policies they're enacting, from the stimulus to the minimum wage, et cetera, this is going to crush small business. And small business, John, is the backbone of America. So I look at these policies with total frustration. But, you know, they don't want to hear from me because they consider me on the right. But
well,
when
they don't want to hear common sense anymore. They don't want to hear common sense anymore. At a certain point in time, everyone can see. I mean, look, you know, Bernie Sanders, I don't want to hear about deficits anymore. Now is not the time to talk about deficits. Well, sometime we got to talk about it. It would have been nice if Republicans talked about it over the last 4 years. They didn't. But here we are. And things, you know, eventually this tab comes due. We got about a minute left here, Trish. I wanted to also talk about some of the emotional response we've seen on the Capitol floor as a result of the riots last week. Rashida Tlaib was out there. Here's what she had to say.
So what happened on January 6th, all I could do was thank Allah that I wasn't here. And I have to tell you, the trauma from just being here, existing as a Muslimah, is so hard, but imagine my team, which I love and lead.
Now, you know, Trish, unfortunately, I've heard from too many lawmakers who have experienced death threats. And this is a horrible thing for anyone. Democrat, Republican, nobody should be getting death threats. But what does one's own race, sex, you know, what does that have to do with anything? I mean, we heard Mike Pence and people calling to have him hung. I mean, this is a traumatic experience. Do we lose something by making this about race and gender as opposed to just the horrible things that happen?
You know, look, there should never be violent threats against any lawmaker, period. I think that's pretty obvious. I think Steve Scalise can tell you all about that. And we need to make sure that there's less extremism and anger, right, in the world so you don't have this violence. But this is very hypocritical coming from a woman who, along with other members of her party, had really no problem, right, attacking Donald Trump and his supporters in such an aggressive, frankly, mean-spirited way. I mean, I'll never forget, you know, Maxine Waters saying that you needed to go out and chase down people that worked in the Trump administration. And we saw the direct ramifications of that, did we not? With Sarah Huckabee Sanders out with her own family just trying to enjoy a meal and getting heckled and attacked by the actual establishment owner. Or you think about Kirstjen Nielsen, who was attacked while just having dinner in a Mexican restaurant. I mean, these things do have consequences, right? Language that we have heard from the left has been, in my view, in many ways, quite violent. And so for them to try and turn the tables on this one, I'm like, wait a second, do you guys forget just exactly what you said all along the way, John? I think they've got amnesia. You know, it's okay for them to say it. It's just, you know, when the tables are turned in some way, shape, or form, even if it's just at a minor in comparison level, they're going to get really mad. And so, yeah, there's a double standard for sure.
You know, and I criticize John Boehner for all those tears he shed, too. I just don't think it's becoming of any lawmaker. I kid against John Boehner. Trish, great to see you, as always. Take care. I'll see you soon.
Hi, Emma Reckenberg here. If you like this video, there's a whole lot more to see on Newsmax TV. You can watch for free right here on our YouTube live stream and be the first one here each time our experts break down real news. Just hit that subscribe button, ring the bell icon, and stay with us on America's fastest growing cable news channel, Newsmax TV.